Hello, dear friends. I don't like to talk about economics or war rumors, but what is happening is too strong to ignore. Economic sanctions against Russia will only benefit the Chinese economy and hurt the European economy, as it happened before. I have suffered a cyber attack that has rendered one of my computer useless, which explains the delay of this video. It seems that my pacifism has not been to the linking of someone involved in the war business. I am slower now because I am working with a different computer, a very different keyboard, and a different operating system that I'm not used to. Opinion piece. Take the money and run. Bank runs begin. The system is much more fragile than it appears to be. People are rushing to get their money out of the system. Are we on the verge of another great financial depression? Ukraine is not registered with the United Nations as an independent state. Let's start. Bank runs has started or have begun. Banks face blackouts as people rush to get their money out of the system, according to the so-called epic economist. In several parts of the world, bank runs have accelerated in recent days after banking system began mysteriously going offline, sparking fears that a possible system collapse is looming as geopolitical tension increases around the world. A financial panic, bank stampede, bank run or bank siege, or more usual, bank run or run on the bank, is a social phenomenon that occurs when a large number of customers of a bank which works with the fractional reserve system make it a short space of time a massive withdrawal of their bank deposits for fear of not being able to withdraw all their money in the future. This fear is caused by the insolvency of the bank when using the mechanism of the bank multiply, since the bank only keeps in cash part of the money it has in its vault. Only keeps in cash a part of the amount deposited by its customers. This massive withdrawal of deposits is due in most cases to the anticipation of a financial crisis or changes in a country's economic policy, and to a lesser extent to expected changes in currency or the unexpected levying of the new taxes or duties on deposits. When a bank run progresses, it fits back on itself, becoming a self-fulfilling prophecy. The more people withdraw their deposits, the greater the probability of a bank default, and this stimulates further withdrawals. A bank panic can destabilize the bank to the point where it has to face bankruptcy. The counterpart of this phenomenon, governments often act by freezing deposits, an action commonly called a corralito. Loss of confidence. And those who still think that these recent bank outages, closures and disruptions were isolated events that will soon be fixed will probably be surprised to discover that this is part of the new normal. Conditions in the financial system are causing many people to lose confidence in banks, especially now that interest rate hikes threaten to trigger a credit crunch similar to what happened during the 2008 financial crisis. But the problems in the financial world run much deeper than most people think, and that is an alarming situation for consumers, who don't even know what is really in store for them. Around the world, and particularly in the US, Canada, and the UK and China, thousands of bank branches have suddenly closed since the outbreak of the crisis. Banks say This is happening because people are still afraid of leaving their homes and prefer to conduct their transactions using online platforms. Operating costs have also increased, and banks tend to cut costs wherever they can. In 2020, more than 2,000 bank branches were closed in the US. That was the highest number of bank closures even recorded through 2021, when approximately 3,000 more branches disappeared from the system without notice. From March 2020 through October 2021, more than 4,000 branches were closed. Nationwide, Wells Fargo closed 267 net branches in 2020, and that number increased to 993 by the end of 2021. This suggests that banks are simply rushing to close as many branches as they can, as fast as they can, wherever they can, the authors noted in the report. The main problem is that the reduced number of branches and ATMs available means that many people would not be able to have cash on hand in case of an emergency. On top of that, the new rules, backed by several world economists, do not require major banks to guarantee that communities will have access to cash when their last branch closes. Europe. In Europe, that has provoked a fierce consumer backlash in recent weeks. In the UK, some dissatisfied customers began moving their money from their accounts to their crypto wallets, while others engaged in the bank run to get their money out of the system. As a result, several banks have seized assets and cryptocurrency wallets amid growing fears that bank runs will continue to occur on a larger and faster scale. Experts warned that 700 to 800 branches will be closed this year in the US alone, as major banks continue to cut costs and attempt to accelerate the digitization process. With all things considered, it is understandable why so many people have begun rushing to withdraw money from their account before authorities impose further restrictions. The world's population is realizing that the system is much more fragile than it appears, and that their wealth is not in fact protected by their bank accounts. The world's population is finally realizing the reality that those very few people in positions of power can choose to confiscate the money we work for all our lives without a good explanation for it. Considering that things are going from bad to worse in the financial markets, it's a good idea to start looking for alternatives to protect our wealth before it all comes crashing down around us. Our leaders won't come to our rescue, and it is safe to say that bunch bureaucrats certainly won't either. Economy. Sharp stock market drop. Wall Street indexes closed sharply lower Wednesday after Ukraine declared a state of emergency, as the State Department said a Russian invasion of Ukraine remains an imminent risk. Second, stock markets closes in red. Wall Street closed in the red Wednesday, with the Dow Jones Industrials, its main gauge, down 1.38% to end at its lowest level in 2022, weighted down again by scaling tensions between Russia and Ukraine. Third, stocks fall, dollar rises as US warns of Ukraine invasion. Global stocks extended a massive sell-off, dollar, gold and oil prices rose, and treasury yields fell Thursday amid growing fears of a full-scale Russian invasion in Ukraine. Fourth, European stock market fall. European stocks closed lower Wednesday as news of the Russia-Ukraine conflict dampened confidence among investors, but modest Western sanctions on Russia and solid corporate earnings report helped limit losses. 5. Euro rises. The euro appreciated Wednesday against the dollar as investors awaited more news on the Ukraine crisis after Western powers announced actions against Russia for sending troops to separatist regions. 6. The euro is trading higher on Wednesday and extended gains more on Tuesday, all despite risk aversion driven by the Ukrainian conflict and awaiting European and US response. 7. Ukraine crisis ripples through stocks. Stocks in Europe fell as much as 2% on Tuesday before recouping most of those losses as investors digested rising Ukraine tensions that nearly put major indexes on the brink of a correction. 8. Gold continues to rise. Gold prices this year are doing quite well despite higher interest rates. Gold is often a reflection of long-term treasuries. The bottom line for gold is that nothing has been fixed in the system, so gold will continue to do well. 9. Cryptocurrencies rise. Stocks and digital assets rose Wednesday after the US and its European allies announced a series of sanctions against Russia following Moscow recognition of two separatist regions in Ukraine as independent entities. 10. Global debt. Bond insurance by emerging markets led by China inflated the amount of global debt to a record of $303 trillion in 2021, although it improved the financial burden to GDP ratio because developed economies recovered. Rumors of war. First, Putin decides to carry out a special military operation to defend Donbass. In quotes, "I have made the decision to carry out a special military operation," the president said during the message to Russian citizens, detailing that the aim of the operation is to protect people who have been abused by the Kiev regime for 8 years. Second, 80% of Russia's forces around Ukraine in attack positions, US official says. President Putin has put 80% of the troops he has assembled in a position to launch a full-scale invasion in Ukraine, a senior US defense official said Wednesday. Third, Ukraine declares a state of emergency. Ukraine declared a 30-day state of emergency on Wednesday and told its citizens in Russia to return home immediately while Moscow began evacuating its embassy in Kiev. Fourth, Ukraine restricts civilian flights in its airspace. Ukraine said early Thursday it had restricted civilian flights in its airspace because of a potential danger, hours after a conflict zone watchdog warned airlines they should halt overflights because of the risk of a shutdown of cyber attack. 5. Ukraine computers affected by data wiping software. A newly discovered piece of destructive software circulating in Ukraine has affected hundreds of computers. 6. Risk of cyber attack with Russia. With Ukraine conflict about to escalate, some private investment analysts expect a wave of cybersecurity attacks on Russian-sponsored organizations. 7. Ukraine calls on UN to help Russia, says it can ignore genocide. Ukraine on Wednesday called to the United Nations General Assembly to stop Russia's aggressive plans, while Russia said it could not ignore the blatant genocide of Russian speakers in eastern Ukraine. 8. Ukraine separatists seek Russian help as US says attack ready. Separatists in Ukraine called on Moscow to help repel aggression on Wednesday and explosion rocked the separatist city of Donetsk in the east, while the US warned that all is ready for a major Russian attack on its neighbor. Spain. A Spanish analyst rules out a Western entry into Ukraine after Putin's speech. International politics analyst Alejandro López Canurea considers that the West would respond with sanctions to a hypothetical entry of Russian troops into the People's Republics of Donetsk and Lugansk, located in Donbass in eastern Ukraine, and ruled out an entry of the Western Bloc into Ukrainian territory. Second, double-edged deterrence. The negative effect of the punishment that part of the international community is preparing against Russia would also affect Spain. The Russian market has been lost for the Spanish agricultural sector for years, and its situation would worsen, but it would benefit trade with China. Third, tens of thousands of Spaniards ruined after investing in solar energy. Approximately 62,000 Spaniards have gone bankrupt 17 years after the government offered subsidies to invest in renewable energy. Reactions. First, United Nations Security Council held a meeting at Ukraine's request. The United Nations Security Council is holding an urgent meeting on Wednesday regarding the situation in the Donbass region at the request of Ukrainian government. Second, rallies discuss how to sanction Russia over Ukraine. Rallies around the world, past the initial shock of President Putin's order to send troops to the eastern regions of Ukraine, are focused on producing the strongest possible reaction. Third, emergency summit in Europe. European Union leaders will hold an emergency meeting Thursday to discuss what course to take following Russia's recognition of two regions in eastern Ukraine after the bloc approved a limited first round of sanctions Wednesday. Fourth, Russia tells United Nations that it doesn't want bloodshed in Ukraine or prepare invasion. Russia's representative to the United Nations Security Council said Monday that his country doesn't want a bloodbath in Donbass, eastern Ukraine region, and assured that there is unfounded panic about the invasion of Ukraine in Western countries. Ukraine doesn't exist. Ukraine has not applied a border registration since 1991, so the state of Ukraine doesn't exist. Legally, according to the United Nations Secretary General, Ukraine has not registered its borders since December 25, 1991. The United Nations has not registered Ukraine's borders as a sovereign state. On July 4, 2014, the then UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon made a startling statement at a session of the UN Security Council. From this, the following conclusion was drawn. According to the CIS Treaty, the territory of Ukraine is an administrative district of the Soviet Union. Therefore, no one can be blamed for separatism and forced change of Ukraine's borders. According to international law, the country simply has no officially recognized borders. To solve this problem, Ukraine needs to complete the demarcation of borders with neighboring countries and obtain the agreement of neighboring countries, including Russia, on their common border. It is required to document everything and sign treaties with all neighboring states. The European Union has placed its support to Ukraine on this important issue and has decided to provide all technical assistance and judicial assistance also. But will Russia sign the border treaty with Ukraine? Of course not. Since Russia is the legal successor of the Soviet Union, the lands on which Ukraine, Belarus, and Novorossiya are located belong to Russia. Basically, now all Russia has to do is to declare that this area is Russian and that everything that happens in this area is an internal Russian affair. Any interference will be seen as a move against Russia. According to the Budapest Memorandum and other agreements, Ukraine has no borders, legally speaking. The state of Ukraine doesn't exist and has never existed, legally speaking. United States. People's convoy heads to Washington. A group of truckers began a cross-country trip Wednesday from California to Washington to protest restrictions following the example of demonstrations that paralyzed Canada's capital, Ottawa, for weeks. Second, 3 men pled guilty to plotting white supremacist driven attack on U.S. power grid. 3 men pleaded guilty Wednesday to participating in a conspiracy to attack U.S. power grids as part of the white supremacist motivated plot to sow civil unrest and economic problems, the Justice Department said. Third, New York to try subway barriers after attacks left riders jittery. The New York City will experiment with installing barriers or gates on some subway platforms, the city's transit chief said Wednesday, with residents nervous about a spike in violence against passengers. Spanish America. First, Argentina breaks recession jinx. Argentina's economy managed to grow 10.3% last year, putting an end to the recession cycle that began in 2018 and was aggravated by the crisis in 2020, although expectations for this year are shaping up to be more moderate. Second, Peru becomes the world's leading exporter of grapes. Peru became the world's leading exporter of fresh grapes in 2021, reaching US $1.26 billion, an increase of 22% over 2020. Third, Cuba and its perfect economic storm, shortages, inflation, and currency exchange rate in the informal market that exceeds 4 times the official exchange rate have generated a rising and unstoppable speculative spiral in Cuba. Fourth, Montevideo Carnival returns after being cancelled in 2021. Uruguayans participate in Montevideo's famous Las Llamadas Party, an annual parade that is considered a celebration of African heritage and the highlight of Carnival in the capital. 5. Colombia's constitutional court decriminalizes abortion up to 24 weeks. Colombia's constitutional court voted this Monday, February 21st, in favor of decriminalizing abortion up to 24 weeks. During the hearing, 5 magistrates voted in favor of the decriminalization of voluntary termination of pregnancy, while the remaining 4 magistrates rejected it. Thus, women will be able to have an abortion up to the 24th week of gestation. It will be illegal to kill a 6-month-old child. 6. Intelligent fence between the Dominican Republic and Haiti. The government of the Dominican Republic inaugurated this Sunday the first stage of an ambitious intelligent border fence, which will extend for 160 kilometers in the border area of that country with Haiti to stop the migratory flow, smuggling, and drug trafficking. And that's all for today. Thanks a lot, dear friends.